Okay, it is a good afternoon from me. It's 20 past 5 um, on a lovely, warm, sunny Friday afternoon, early evening. In fact, it's been very, very warm this week, and as you can see, I've caught a bit of a suntan. Now, there's a lot of sport to discuss. Now, Stanley Cup playoffs have reached the conference final stage. We know the Florida Panthers are in the Stanley Cup final. Vegas looks very likely to beat Dallas in the other conference finals. We most likely will have a first time winner in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, which will be really interesting having a brand new Stanley Cup champion. Obviously, Carolina have won it once before, Dallas have won it once before. Florida have been to the final once before. Vegas have been to the final once before. So these teams, it really changes the dynamic. Football side of things, over here in the UK, Brighton have qualified for Europe for the first time in their history. Manchester United have qualified for the Champions League. Liverpool have missed out on Champions League qualification. They will be in the Europa League next season. Newcastle have also qualified for the Champions League for the first time in a very long time. Best part of 2.5 decades, I think. And so, yes, Man City's still on course for a treble. Um, they've just got to win the FA Cup final and the Champions League final. But with the way Man City dismantled Real Madrid, I would have bet against that. As I say, so it's getting really interesting. The relegation battle is getting very interesting. It is going down to the last day of the season. Leicester have to win regardless. Everton, all they require is technically a draw and Leeds to lose, and hope Leicester don't win. So there's lots of permutations at the bottom of the Premier League. What is interesting is all three of those clubs involved in that relegation fight have changed manager this season. So have Southampton, who have been relegated. The only team in the bottom five not to change manager is Nottingham Forest, and they're safe. So that tells you a lot about reactionary sackings in football. We've had a record-breaking season for managerial sackings. We've got State of Origin in Australia coming up in the year with the NRL State of Origin and NRLW State of Origins, men's and women's. That's taking place next Wednesday. That's going to be kind of interesting. There's only four debutants for game one in the squads. And there's been talk about players' loyalty and players not being selected. But there's only four debutants: one for Queensland, three for New South Wales. I think it's going to be a very, very close series. Yes, some very, very informed players and good players have missed out. Um, but that's the job of the selectors. If a selection goes wrong, the coaches have to cop that. So Billy Slater, there is discussions about his coaching future. The Dragons are still looking. Um, yeah, we've had a bit of a tough week. I've had a family bereavement, which is why there's been no content this week so far. I have a funeral to go to on the 12th, so there'll be no content whatsoever on the 12th of next month because I'm going to my grandmother's funeral. Other than that, we are getting by. It's the circle of life. Yes, it's upsetting and sad, but life has to go on. I mean, I still been going to work every day. Um, it's just sorting out the logistics of getting down to the southwest of England, which is a 4-hour train ride and 4 hours back. So I'm going to have a very, very long day in a couple of weeks, and then I'm back at work the next day. So I don't get long. The weather's been fantastic if you're not out working in it. Hence why I'm a bit red and my arms are sunburned. I've been out obviously working. We've had I believe, the start of a very lengthy dry spell. We've had no rain now for over a week and a half. It's meant to get hotter next week. We're meant to have a heat wave. We're meant to be above average temperatures, and I believe we could reach temperatures that were higher than last year, which were record breaking, which will have an impact on sport. Obviously, we've got the Ashes series in the cricket between England and Australia, which will be hosted in the UK. And yeah, hot conditions may impact with water breaks when they play games. Should we have day-night tests in regards to that? The World Championship Ice Hockey will be entering the medal stages over the next few days. Obviously, Canada losing 3-2 to Switzerland was not expected at the start of the tournament. The Swiss have been fantastic. They've really, really been fantastic so far in the World Championship Ice Hockey. And then the International Rugby League Board will be meeting at some point in the coming weeks to discuss where they're going to, you know, place the 2025 Rugby League World Cup. We have no idea who's going to replace France as hosts. This is France are the second host to withdraw, citing cost issues after the US. So the 2025 World Cup, Rugby League World Cup, is becoming a bit of a problem. Obviously, the situation has changed economically and financially over the last couple of years, which is obviously going to impact how profitable or loss making the tournament will be. It's obviously got to be frustrating for the players. It's kind of funny viewed as the soccer capital of America from a European. When I've done what is interesting when it comes to viewership in the US, California is the highest ranking state for views in the US by a long way, massive. I did that, states that viewers are US states that viewers are watching from the top 10. California is miles ahead of Hawaii and Utah. Yes, Hawaii and Utah are the second and third most popular states for viewers in the US. Florida's in the top four, miles ahead. I would say California. Obviously, a lot of owners of major league sports teams are based in California. But yes, they do. Look, you do have two teams in Los Angeles. You do have a team. Where else? San Jose have a team. Um, Obviously, Sacramento want to become a major league soccer franchise, and they play at the next level down. But also, California is a hotbed, and the West Coast is a hotbed for rugby union as well. The Mormons love me. I think that there's a big Polynesian, like Samoan, Tongan community, because there's a lot of Mormons who are actually from the Pacific Island nations who have settled over in Utah or spend time in Utah. But no, California is by far and away the most popular state for views on the channel. So I don't think it's just a hotbed for soccer, as you would call it, or as I would call it, football. But I do think it's one of the most populous states. It's got a very high population. It's one of the three most economically viable states for economy. Um, so there's a lot of disposable income in some locations in California, not all. Texas and New York as well. I'm surprised that Texas and New York weren't higher in the top 10 of US states. Considering again, you've got New York City, you've got Houston, Dallas, big sports markets where there's a lot of disposable income. But yeah, no, definitely the two LA teams do help Major League Soccer massively. There are a lot of Europeans who are based over in Los Angeles and San Francisco for work as well. There's a lot of British people go over to the US for work, and especially to California, a lot of tech companies. So if you're working for a tech company, you've got to go to California for a work conference or for training or any kind of work related. You might end up relocating there from Europe or the UK. You might go over there and relocate permanently. So that does um, have an impact. Well, if you watch like the top 10 locations for cities and US states, European countries, countries in general, there are some surprises on those lists, and those videos are up on the channel. I've done them over the last couple of months, while sports news has become a bit quiet, for example. And I thought I'd just look at where people are viewing from, why, what cities as well. Australia's seen a massive surge in interest in the channel over the last week or so, partly due to Paul Kent, the NRL 360 host, being arrested and suspended from work due to his ongoing legal issues off the TV and away from the newspaper. Lipton iced tea, the best. Peach flavour. It's fantastic in the summer. Normally have it with a couple of ice cubes. And Texas is NFL and college football, absolutely. But at the same time, ice hockey is very popular in Texas. There's calls to relocate the Arizona Coyotes to Houston, who've had ice hockey before. Obviously, Dallas Stars are in the conference final in the Stanley Cup. But Texas is American football. California is everything. Every sport, I think, gets an equal opportunity in California, in the major leagues, which is very, very interesting. But Texas, rugby union's growing in popularity. The MLS is reasonably popular, because Texas has attracted people from all over the US and around the world because of the oil and gas industry. And they also have aircraft manufacturing. They have tech jobs. Very wealthy state, very big state. Some of the biggest urban areas in the US are in Texas, and they are cheaper than California. People from California are relocating to Texas, and they take their sports with them. So Texas and California really do drive, the US sports market massively. There are some other locations in the US that drive the sports markets. Vegas is now becoming the location of choice for the major leagues. The Vegas Golden Knights have now triggered a sort of, how do I put it, a domino effect where like they go, then the NFL goes. Now Major League Baseball's considering it, Major League Soccer's considering it. You know, the NBA has got to consider Vegas at some point. But the Vegas Golden Knights have got in there first. The NHL's got in there first and have basically won that sports market. The NFL relocated the Oakland Raiders there. They're trying to build in that market. So I'm surprised Nevada isn't higher in the top 10 because of the Vegas sports market, but it is what it is. But no, the US states did surprise me. Do you think Major League Rugby will go? It'll be interesting. At some point, I think Major League Rugby will, grow bigger than what it is. I think it started off small, which I think was a good starting point. I think it learnt from the mistakes of the MLS, which I think have benefited Major League Rugby a little bit. They've chosen smaller stadiums to play in. They've chosen, um, the markets they've chosen already had an amateur and recreational game, and was also being played at high school and uh, collegiate level. So they've been very smart in where they've gone, especially like the Rocky Mountain, like Colorado and Utah. There is a lot of Pacific Island nations, uh, people over there, partly to do with the Mormon Church, but there's a lot of them who've gone over there, from Pacific Islands. Same with California. They've been very, very smart in where they place their teams and the size of stadiums they're using. I think they realised very, very quickly where Major League Soccer went wrong. They definitely learned from the mistakes of the previous 20, 25 years with the MLS. Now, whether the MLS expansion model is sustainable long term, we shall wait and see when they reach that 30, 32 team mark, which is where the other major leagues are at. We will see what happens with the MLS going forward. I think the 2026 World Cup is going to be crucial for the development of Major League Soccer and the stabilisation. Um, but we'll have to see if they can still attract that European-based talent, a bit earlier in their careers when they're still at prime. And we'll have to see if eventually Major League Soccer can become, rather than being reliant on expansion fees, more reliant on just general year-to-year revenue and stability. I think Vegas will become a big sports market in the future. As you said, two of the big four unless it's Benvenuto or something. Yeah, look, I'm not sold on how F1 is going around just basically having a third of the season in the US eventually. It's just because it's Liberty Media. They're really, really desperately trying to get the US market on board. And I'm not sure NASCAR, IndyCar, or IMSA will be too happy with F1 nicking their motorsport fans, for four wheels. I can understand, Liberty Media being an American group wanting to grow the sport, grow the fan base in the US, but at the expense of the traditional markets, you do run the risk of upsetting the apple cart too much. But no, I wouldn't be surprised if other major leagues outside of the NFL. I mean, I think the Oakland A's are interested in going to Vegas and following the Raiders and relocating. There's discussions around that, the pros and cons. It's nothing set in stone, but it looks like the Oakland A's will be leaving the Bay Area of California, and potentially relocate to Vegas. But Vegas was underrated as a sports market for years, heavily reliant on the boxing and the UFC going there. The major leagues really didn't pay attention to what people in Vegas wanted, and a lot of people in Vegas come from other states originally, and they moved to Vegas for work opportunities, to retire. Obviously, the gaming industry There's a lot of corporate offices now in Vegas, so a lot of people have relocated from other parts of the US and other parts of the world, and they've taken their sports fandom with them, which I think has helped to a certain extent with the Vegas Golden Knights and obviously the Oakland Raiders, just being the Oakland Raiders and just the Raiders in general. I think that has helped those two teams establish themselves with the Vegas fan base. I am surprised the NBA isn't there, and I'm surprised Major League Soccer hasn't thought, "Oh, this is a you know there's money to be made here." Um, and now with the legalization of sports gambling in the US, um, and the revenue that's brought in for sports leagues. We can debate the pros and cons of that. Obviously, the US sports fans don't like advertisers and sponsors on their jerseys. They go completely mental. The most capitalist society in the world can't stand a sponsor that big on a jersey. I mean, they must have fits when they look at European and Australian and South American sports kits. They must have apoplectic fits looking at some of the kits and jerseys and strips that our sports teams have played in for the best part of 30 to 40 years. And some of those iconic kits like Serie A in the 80s and the 90s, the old Division One kits from the 80s, the early Premier League kits are absolutely iconic. Who can forget the Carlsberg with Liverpool, the McEwen's Lager with Blackburn, the Sharp jerseys for um, Manchester United, the Edios jerseys for Man City. These were iconic. It's because gambling is still. I wouldn't say it is now because the way they've legalised it. It's up to it's up to state level now to enact the legislation and to give the go ahead. Um, and so I think slowly but surely each state is eventually relaxing its gambling rules. So I know at a federal level it is for each state can now okay it. Some states still haven't. But the amount of tax revenue and the amount of revenue that these companies are now bringing in and jobs at a time when we've seen the pandemic and we've seen economic slowdown and we've seen consumer spending drop. If an industry can suddenly have a surge, and we can debate the pros and cons of gambling, and I only do the Euro Millions and the National Lottery every so often. Occasionally, I might get a scratch card, but in reality, I don't gamble on sports anymore. I don't gamble on the slot machines. I don't, do the online bingo and all that. Those online gambling sites because look at what's happened to Ivan Tony. I would use that as an example, and this is, I think, that is the scary thing with having sports gambling and the amount of sponsorship that sports leagues and teams and individuals now have is very worrying. And we've seen a high-profile athlete here in the UK get an 8-month ban. Now his ban was actually shortened because he is seeking counselling for gambling addiction. Um, I wouldn't say it's still. I would say, look, Vegas and Atlantic City for decades now have have been like holiday destinations for out of staters who can't gamble in their own state. But yeah, the concerning thing is, I think, is professional sports reliance on gambling revenues and gambling sponsorship. As I say, Ivan Tony, Joe Barton, others, Stuart Bingham. I mean, these are English, or British sportsmen, but we've seen it across the world. There has to be a very clear code of conduct and a very strict code of conduct, and there has to be punishments as a result. Now, the fact that it's more widespread than the handful of people getting caught uh, with problem gambling or breaching sport betting rules, it is clearly a concern for the sporting authorities and why, you know, uh, so that then raises the question of match fixing or throwing games or spot fixing. I mean, it becomes very murky and grey. And so I think, Kieran Trippier's suspension, Daniel Sturridge, Ivan Tony, Joe Barton before him, these are high profile suspensions of players. Um, and they varied in severity of suspension, but that's in football. Obviously, Stuart Bingham in snooker got 6 months. So clearly, it's not a one-off incident if multiples of sportsmen, athletes, or snooker player athletes really, but professional sports people are getting caught. Yeah, it's well, every weekend's an exciting weekend of sport. Let's be honest. A big team in the Premier League is getting relegated. Well, two big teams in the Premier League are getting relegated this weekend. Um, and Everton, with their goal difference, if it came down to goal difference, or in so if Everton were to lose and Leicester win just 1-0, the goal difference kills Everton. And that's regardless of what Leeds do. It it really is going to be a mental last day of the season. Got the Monaco F1 as well. Obviously, the Grand Prix at Imola obviously was cancelled because of the flooding. Uh, what do I think of the La Rochelle Heineken Cup win? Well, look, Ronan O'Gara has come out and basically said he wants to coach Ireland at some point. We'll obviously have to see what happens with Andy Farrell in the World Cup and any length of contract extension he may or may not get, how long he wants to stay as Ireland head coach. Ireland need to get past the quarter final. In fact, Ireland, I think, need to win this World Cup to put those doubts to bed. But Ronan O'Gara has basically said he wants to be Ireland coach at some point. Ronan O'Gara was a Munster player, so for him it was a derby match anyway in his mind because he played for Munster for many years. Leinster were his biggest rivals, and Johnny Sexton was his understudy when he was at the end of his career. Johnny Sexton was at the beginning of his international career. They were rivals for that fly half jersey not that long ago, towards the end of O'Gara's career. So there's a bit of personal rivalry between them. If I'm honest, I don't watch club rugby union. It's like I don't watch regular season play in the football apart from the cup competitions and obviously the internationals. So I think um, La Rochelle winning it's good, and it does highlight O'Gara as a coach. It really bumps up his standing as a coach. Um, it'll be interesting if Everton don't stay up because I think they really are in trouble then. Because of their ongoing financial fair play issues and the losses they're making, and that stadium build that's going to be very, very expensive, that could destroy the club. In regards to Man City, the Man City investigation, Guardiola's now basically said, "Look, we need to get this done." Guardiola stated, if the club are found guilty, they should be, he'll walk. So even though Man City have won it on the field this league season, they've still got two trophies they can compete for. They may walk away with just one trophy this season. And then they may have that title stripped anyway. A lot depends on what comes out of the FA Premier League investigation into Manchester City, and what punishment is given to them. I mean, Juventus have had another points deduction, so they had their 15-point deduction overturned, which put them from seventh to third in Serie A, and they had another 10 points taken off as they dropped back down into sixth or seventh again. So Juventus are having their ongoing issues as well. Um, well, look, Liverpool City Council signed off on it. The people within Liverpool Council, Merseyside Council, have been arrested and charged with fraud over that stadium. There's a lot of issues with that stadium build that people don't realise. There's criminality with it. I think, to be brutally honest, I can't see why Everton couldn't have invested at Goodison like Liverpool have invested at Anfield. It really boggles my mind. Um, so there's a lot of question marks about a lot of the decisions taken at Everton since the mid-90s. Um, who do I want to go up, Coventry or Luton? Well, I work with a Coventry fan, so he obviously wants them to go up, and they basically not were that draw we had against them as Blackburn fan was the reason why we missed out on playoffs. Um, On the Luton side of things, they've never been a Premier League club. The last time they were in the top flight, I think, was the 80s or the early 90s. So it'd be kind of nice to see what I don't really mind. So to me, it'll be just a great day out for both sets of fans. Both clubs have had dreadful time of it the last couple of decades. Luton have been in the non-league. Coventry have been in League Two. Coventry have had money problems, stadium issues. Luton, they need a new stadium. They don't have a lot of money. So whoever wins out that game, they're in dreamland for a year at least. And if they do stay up in the Premier League, fair play to them. Yeah, it was nice to see Nottingham Forest stay up. I'm not happy with Nottingham Forest's transfer policy though. I think that caused them a lot of problems to begin the season. Having a full squad turnover is ridiculous. Yeah, Sale versus Saracens. That's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, Saracens not a long ago were thrown out of the Premiership because of salary cap breaches, and lo and behold, the season they're back up, they ring fence it. So let's work out that what you will. And of course, the finances of rugby union in club level are in chaos. London Irish have 4 days to finalise their takeover and funding. Otherwise, they end up like Wasps and Worcester. That could be a shambles. I want country to go up. They've had a few bad few decades. Well, again, poor ownership decisions. In fact, dodgy owners they've had. Some really bad decisions were made, including that bloody stadium, which has bankrupted Wasps. Lo and behold, so the stadium has been a money pit since before it was being built. As I say, with the Liverpool City Council, that's a bit of the other channel. But the stadium, Everton's new stadium build has impacted Liverpool more than people realise in a negative way. I'm not even sure if all Merseysiders really understand some of the dodgy dealings that have gone into that stadium. And I don't like bagging the city of Liverpool because the city's had some bad headlines and some bad events happen to it over the years. But that stadium rebuild, while it is creating jobs for people who are building it, it's cost Liverpool its UNESCO World Heritage Site. So with good comes bad. Um, um, I would like to see. Look, obviously, I would like to see Sale do well as well. If Saracens were to win it again, eyebrows will be raised. And I work with a couple of Saracens fans, so that's always fun. But with what's Saracens, there's going to be question marks if they win it. People are going, well, are they breaching the cap again? We've seen 2 clubs go bust. A third is about to go bust. Other clubs are struggling to survive. So there is that. But as I say, club rugby union doesn't interest me. I'm only really interested in international rugby union, and that I think that's part of the problem that rugby union is now currently facing. Thoughts on Duncan as they get in the England squad and Balogun switching to the US. Dunk deserves to get in there. He's been an absolute. He leads by example at Brighton. He's that sort of leadership figure that the England squad desperately need at the back. Maguire should be nowhere near that squad. In fact, several players should be nowhere near that squad. Balogun switching to the US is a concern, and I think again a lot of that lies with Southgate and how they select players in his coaching team. And that's personal opinion. And there are some viewers of this channel who are not Southgate fans. It's going to be interesting if England, have a poor qualifying campaign or struggle at next year's tournament. Well, yes, Southgate's decided to stay on. That decision could be questioned, and I think we have started to go backwards a little bit. We do have some great young talented players that I think are being held back. Just let them play. Let them play. But there are some players who should be nowhere near that England squad, in my opinion. Maguire being one. The truth is, unless someone has a Premiership team, most sports fans are interested in. Yeah, no, I think club rugby for me has never really interested me at all. Club rugby union never has. It never. I've always been a rugby league fan for. In fact, I'm now more of a rugby league fan than a union fan. I think rugby union have made World Rugby at least, have made some shocking decisions, and the financial model of rugby union is clearly broken, um, and is not and is not sustainable. COVID has exposed problems that were already there. I mean, when people were discussing Wasps in that situation with Wasps, they were in financial difficulty about 3 4 years before COVID. Well, as soon as they moved to Coventry, they were having problems. Um, yeah, International Rugby League is a shambles. Although we have got a 3 game series against Tonga at the end of the year, which will be fun. I wish it was Australia or New Zealand, but it's Tonga, which is great for the Pacific Island nations. That a top Pacific Island nation plays one of the bigger nations, up there. Um, but the international game with rugby league is the IRL, International Rugby League board, are just incompetent to the nth degree. I think the only way we're going to grow the game internationally is it has to be led by the NRL. Super League, as with its growth strategy, has fouled that up with their Canadian experiment that didn't work, and COVID didn't help, but it wasn't going to work anyway. So I think the NRL is the key in growing into the international game. Obviously, France withdrawing from hosting the World Cup is just devastating, but that was based down to the French government shafting French rugby league yet again. Um, no, it's not the only international rugby league scheduled. There are some other test matches that will be played, but because the World Cup was delayed by a year, that has really screwed up the international scheduling. But again, the IRL is just not good enough. I don't think the Rugby League World Cup format necessarily needs to change, but decisions taken about who hosts. I mean, the US pulled out, France have pulled out. Just alternate between England and Australia and New Zealand. They're the only nations that clearly can host a World Cup at rugby league level at the moment, and that's your problem. But the ironic thing is, without the French, we don't have a rugby league World Cup. So I don't know how we fix that problem. I'm gonna have to. Oh, my back is something. I'm gonna have to rotate this. Hang on one second. Oh, I want to put my feet up. But the next NRL team could be an island team. Well, there is a suggestion there'll be another Brisbane team, which will be Pacific Island orientated, where they might take a game to Fiji or have a Pacific Island kind of element to the franchise. But again, I would think when COVID hit, they were discussing about putting expansion on hold. Expansion went ahead on time for the Dolphins. So, in my opinion, I think it's going to be another team in Queensland. I don't. They maybe they could go to Perth or they could go to the South Island, New Zealand. There are options on the table. North Sydney Bears or the Central Coast Bears. The Bears could make a return. Um, um, I wouldn't say hosting the Rugby League World Cup continent in England is a good thing or more regularly. I mean, the last couple of alternate between us and the Australians. But I think international rugby league, because the international my god rugby league board being basically useless for a significant get rid of that a significant period of time is an ongoing concern. But look, people were saying, "Oh, 2017 World Cup crowds weren't great." The ground. I think a lot has changed in rugby league since 2017 in Australia to now. Attendances are up. TV viewership is up. I think people took rugby league for granted, and then when COVID hit, and then because it was the first sport to resume, I think they've realised we've taken this sport for granted too long. I'm more of a rugby union fan because union international games are more competitive than the league. However, having both two close to me going has killed the West. Look, I think some bad decisions were made. I think Worcester just obviously COVID did for them, but you've got Coventry who signed some good players. I think Coventry have signed quite a few of the Worcester squad. So I think if they get rid of ring fencing, Coventry will be in the Premiership sooner rather than later. But Premiership rugby and their governance, they've got to get rid of some of their stupid criteria. Um, and then you've got to wonder why they're not, getting fans through the turnstiles and selling out games. But no, as I say, club rugby union just doesn't work for me. I've played it, but watching it, it doesn't work for me. In regards though to rugby league, I mean, as I say, a lot of people said, "Oh, the 2017 World Cup in Australia, the crowds weren't great. The final was half half the capacity of half the fans at the World Cup final in 2017 compared to the one we just had, etc., etc." But as I say, a lot's happened. They are. I think they were hindered, ironically, by Wasps going to Coventry, which I think was more damaging for the sport when you've got a local team with a committed local fan base, with local juniors, pathways in place. Wasps just transplanting himself with no connection to the community was the most brain dead decision ever. It would have made more sense for Wasps to build a stadium in North London or something like that. That had which had a smaller capacity than the Rico or Coventry Built Society Arena. That became a money pit. Um, moving the team out of London to the West Midlands was the death knell for them. Wasps failing should surprise no one. Worcester snuck up on us a little bit, but that was COVID. Wasps failing has actually helped Coventry. But at the same time, I feel sorry for the Wasps fan base because they've been let down by the hierarchy of that club for a long time. The amateur type club is still going, and are 3 levels above where the professional club will be playing next season. Couldn't make that one up. But the structures of club rugby union need to change fundamentally. We need to look at governance. We need to look at owners, transparency over things. A lot of issues need to be looked at. And where we go from here, I don't know. But I think the damage has been done, and Worcester was the domino effect. London Irish could be next. But then how far does the domino effect go? I think the amateur side will, eventually may even sue what was the professional outfit for trademark infringement. I but this is the domino effect. I can see more clubs really struggling. We need to look at why the RFU decided to stop regulating the club game through the levels and sign over to Premiership rugby and Championship rugby, and then the levels. We need to look at who really is running the game. We've got too many levels of governance, which just doesn't help anyone. Yeah, we'll find out if London Irish are, to go. I mean, we lost London Welsh not that long ago, within the last decade. So the warning signs have been there long before COVID, wreaked havoc. I think London Welsh and their struggles, and even to be fair, Richmond back in the day getting thrown out of the Premiership in the late 90s. I mean, London Welsh going belly up, but the warning signs have been there for a decade, that the financial model of the game is not sustainable. And Wasps have been in trouble for a long time. Now, even Wasps, Irish, and Warriors fall to the bottom of the pyramid, nothing will change. I just feel if they didn't care to see the warning signs, then they won't care to help. Yeah, I can see that really forcing them to go, well, we'll have to get ring fencing was ridiculous because teams like Coventry, for example, or Cornish Pirates, who've been banging at the door to get in to the top flight for so long, have been denied that opportunity, and they're clearly running at a more sustainable model than the teams that have failed because they sell out their stadiums. They don't use stadiums that are too big for them. Although Worcester have been in six ways for a while, but then with ring fencing, you don't get an extra a Chiefs kind of story with that team and the last decade and a half that extra Chiefs have had. Look, London Scottish are not where they used to be. Richmond have never got back to the top flight. Um, make of that what you will. Um, make of that what you will. I think we're in this situation, and I think football has got similar issues with you know governing body domestically, which is the FA in England, or the Scottish FA in Scotland, for example, really washing their hands and saying to the league, "Run yourself." Um, and the governance of clubs, and club finances, and transparency is my Lipton's iced tea is stronger than club governance. There you go, and that's the low calorie version, by the way. Um, that's my view on professional sport governance. Um, there are too many bad actors. The money isn't evenly distributed. Bad decisions have been made and allowed to be signed off. And if they ring fence Super League from next year, you're never going to get a London team in the Super League. Which then you know they've ring fenced Super League before. They very quickly got rid of that. They're worried about a big team from Super League, like let's say Leeds Rhinos or someone like that, getting relegated. But that means teams like the Bradford Bulls and London Broncos, for example, can't get back in. So that's a ludicrous idea. They did it before, didn't work. They very quickly got rid of it. Um, Again, it's the haves and have-nots. So if you're below a certain level, you're not allowed in. You know, or close shop, which ironically I think harms rather than helps the sport and how our sporting culture works. So, but again, I don't watch Super League. I really this is where rugby league is not growing in this country. Um, the fact that London Broncos are now a semi-professional outfit tells you all you need to know about the failure of really trying to grow the game in this country. Um, we're gonna see a Challenge Cup final with again a crowd that's not filling out Wembley. Um, yeah, well, at the moment, I think we need to look at rugby union and its pay structure, and again, I go back to Augustine Peashot. He was proven right in 2019. He stated when he was standing against Bill Beaumont, the game needs to change. The professional game needs to pay the top talent a bit less, and the rest of the talent a little bit more. Um, we need to be more sustainable. We're not financially sustainable. Club is not sustainable. Lo and behold, Super Rugby's collapsed into a new Super Rugby style franchise. The South African teams have joined the Pro League, which is now the United Rugby Championship. The Welsh regions are bankrupt. He was proven right. Two professional clubs in England have gone bust. A third could go bust. Who knew? Who knew the guy? And he got so pissed off with how rugby union was being governed that he left the organisation. So let that sink in. Will players walk away from La Liga or refuse to sign there? We know Barcelona's got a player extras coming up of some of their veteran players because of their money problems. Yet they want to get Messi to go back. Yet all the teammates that help Messi get to where he is are leaving. Makes sense what that will. Um, I think there's a reason why. This is what gets me when players get all this abuse, be it homophobic or racist or just death threats or whatever. Every league has a professional players association, like a trade union. Go on strike. There you go. If the players really put their foot down, without players, you don't have a product. So we'll see what happens. I think La Liga, are trying to really hush this, and I don't think it should be making bigger headlines. Uh, Players, instead of taking the pissing knee or standing inside that, go on fucking strike. Clearly, it's an issue within the sport. You have a players' association, a players' union. Go on strike. Go on strike. Say no, this is unacceptable. We refuse to play. Very, very quickly, that the authorities then will do something. Without the players, you don't have a product. It will cost the owners a lot of money and sponsors and TV companies because games aren't being go on strike. Very quickly, when games aren't getting played, doesn't matter if it's pre-season, cup finals, the end of the regular, but go on strike. Right? Go on strike. It really that will very quickly the authority will go, yeah, okay, well now we need to stop this. Now we need to take action. Because to be honest, Real Madrid fans are just as guilty of racially abusing other players on other teams as the rest of the Liga fan bases. But he's their black player, so we don't abuse him, but we'll abuse. I remember Marcos was his name. He used to play for Villarreal. He used to copy from the other 19 fan bases in La Liga in the mid 2000s. He used to copy it all the time. He got selected for Spain. They were sending him death threats. The players need to vote for strike action. Very quickly, the authorities might go, we'll have to do something. This is costing us millions and millions, if not tens of millions, euros, pounds, dollars, liras in Turkey, whatever currency you use, costing them money. Do you think rugby union, rugby league can have professional second tiers on the level of something on the national league? They need TV money. They rugby league should be selling itself, and it doesn't because the people in charge of Super League and the people in charge of the Championship and the RFL are just incompetent. Rugby union is now showing it's incompetent as well. So get some decent administrators and stop with the gimmicky kind of ideas where we'll move teams and we'll relocate them and we'll come up with £1 million games and then we'll ring fence. Get rid of the gimmicks and the stupid rule changes. Market yourselves better. Rugby union is the scrum is a mess. The lineout's a joke. The tackle laws that are we need to just head high shots have always been illegal in the game. Now you got to go from the waist below. You're going to have people breaking what? But you haven't rewarded legs tackles for 25 years. But then I was always told hit in the gut, hit the ball, hit below the shoulders and between the knees and the shoulders. You are going to flatten a big bloke. Why are players swinging on? That's always been illegal in the game. The lawmakers have allowed headshots to be got away with for so long, reckless headshots. You can't even dump tackle now. The old drive. Oh, no, that's a tip tackle. Has the guy broken his neck? No. Well, the reason why the guy's concussed is because he's copped a headshot 5 minutes ago. The HIA's missed it. You're not enforcing mandatory stand downs. You're getting sued. The lawmaker. Ugh. Don't get me started on rugby union, rugby league, and headshots because the inconsistencies. I've seen inconsistencies in the two matches I watched yesterday and today in the NRL that are baffling me. That a couple of weeks ago was sin bins that not even been put on reports, so they can't even consistently, apply rules. Maybe they can say about it because Oh, they've done points deductions, they've done stadium closures, they've done massive fines, nothing happens. The players stop playing, the clubs lose even more money, which Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Valencia, and all these other Spanish clubs cannot afford because they're all fucking bankrupt. So if the players go, we're not playing, we go, we're not going to play, we're going on strike. Club presidents, investors, sponsors, all club presidents like Florentino Perez, we can get him out of the game if the players go on strike. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. The most hated guy in football could be out of a job because he's not really protecting his players. They send out these nice wordy gestures going, it's wrong. But their fan base is just as bad as Valencia, Villarreal, Barcelona, Bilbao, a lot of them. Spanish football's rife with it. The players need to go on strike. Go, fuck it, we've had enough. We've copped this for 30, 40 years. We're not going to tolerate it no more. We've had enough. We're done. Both, oh God, well, we're going to nosh me off. No, no, go on strike. The knee thing never worked. It was pointless. It was crap. It was annoying. It was solving nothing. Go on strike. Make a proper stand. Economically hurt your employers who are doing nothing to protect you. That hurts. Costing your employers money hurts. Doing a pointless 5-second gesture where it looks like you're stretching your quads does nothing. It actually encourages the morons to continue to abuse you, is what I've gathered. This is why I got rid of social. That's why I got rid of Twitter. Go on strike. Financially hurt the game. They will take action. Stretching quads out a little bit and needs some nice social media posts does nothing. Rainbow Laces campaign. Homophobia is right. Taking the knee. Racism still happens. Right. Appointing a female referee. We're making progress. Sexism still happens. Reports have proven this. Right. Promoting the women's game team. Nope. Go on strike very quickly. They will start going, right, you're out. You're not coming in this stadium ever again. You're getting a lifetime ban. You're getting a lifetime ban. You're getting a lifetime ban. Oh, by the way, you've all been reported to police. You're getting nicked. You've lost your job. Your wife's going to leave you. Your mortgage is going to default. You're going to be homeless. Well done. Honestly, taking a knee did nothing. Nothing. Going on strike will do something because it will cost them money, which they can ill afford to lose. Honestly, it's not hard. You want better working conditions? Go on strike. That's what a union's for. The unions, right? Again, social media posts, statements. This is abhorrent. Put it to your players. Go on strike. Force the clubs and La Liga and the Spanish FA, or just every league, every FA, to take action in in parallel with the police and the judiciary. It when big industries lose money, they do something, right? They will pull an advert. They will stop sponsoring, whatever. Honestly, all it takes is the players to go, we're going to play games for 48 hours. The players were willing to go on strike about La Liga wanting to take a Barcelona Girona game to the US. They were more pissed off about that than their teammates copying bananas at them and monkey chants. And when Luis Figo went from Barcelona to Real Madrid, he got a pig's head thrown at him, which is meant to be an anti-Semitic kind of thing. And mobile phones looked at his head. The players were more pissed off, the players in Spain were more pissed off that Barcelona wanted to take a game to the US than Vinicius Jr. copying 9 separate incidents in 2 years that have been reported to La Liga. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's the same with the PFA here. They were advising players not to take pay deferrals so clubs could survive. Let that sink in. Hurt the clubs the most. They were like, oh no, right? They were advising, which was so out of step with the rest of the country. It was ridiculous, ridiculous, right? Change needs to happen with players' unions in a variety of sports. I mean, in the NRL, the players were threatening to go on strike, and the league said, "Oh, we'll forward you ahead with reserve graders." Well, some of those reserve graders are in, you know, will get called up to, a senior squad after they played X amount of games. They're automatically a member of the Rugby League Players Association. So if the union goes on votes to go on strike, they don't have to play. You won't be able to get players, and they shit themselves. They were like, Christ. The players, however, didn't go full out for strike. They just disrupted the NRL's media commitments and doing sponsors days, media days, and not talking to the media. So they embarrassed the NRL a little bit, and they've still got ongoing CBA negotiations. Oh, well, Major League Cricket. Yeah, there's a couple of high-profile players signing up for it. We'll see. Well, ban Spanish clubs from the Champions League. Look, we've had seen partial stadium bans. No club has ever been thrown out of European club football for racist chants aimed at players or online abuse. They just give them partial stadium bans for fans. No, the only time we've seen clubs banned is because Liverpool fans couldn't behave themselves at Hazel. But precedent's been there in the past. It's just UEFA are gutless, because they fear the Super League. UEFA fears the Super League. If they block the Spanish clubs, they fear a rise in the Super League. The players clearly don't want to play in a Super League because they know that then they're not eligible for Champions League and La Liga titles and Copa del Rey's because various things. But UEFA are quite conscious of the fact that European Super League isn't fully dead; it's just in a coma, and doing that to Spanish clubs brings that idea back again. The two of the three clubs still cling to it are Spanish. Um, every country has moronic people, and yes is the answer. Yes, even in countries where you might have South Asian, so subcontinental descent, like Kenya and Uganda, the Indian and Bengali populations, a lot of them came over here because of brutal racism and persecution and genocide in Uganda's case. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a thing. Um, we've seen it Europe, US, Canada, South America, Central America, Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Yeah, it happens. I think that the countries that don't seem to have it are the Oriental Asian countries. They don't really have there might be nationalistic tensions between countries, but in reality, you don't hear of as much in the way of um, that kind of discussion. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it seems less prevalent. But no, we've I'm at a loss as to the no, not England, not just England. No, 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 no. That's a misconception. You clearly haven't seen social media, some of the North American leagues, then or Australian and Kiwi leagues. Honestly, it's a thing. Um, some of the NRL Indigenous players of Aboriginal and Torres Islander descent have really players like Latrell Mitchell, for example, have had just a bucketful. It's not just an England or British problem. The media might like to twist it that way, but it really, really so far from the truth. It's unreal. Um, it, 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 it's unfortunately with the polarization we've seen over the last, I'm going to say, decade with politics, it transplants itself in society, and sport, highlights the issues within society. You see it with your fan bases. Um, but oh, oh yes, I'd rather not talk about the neo-fascist state in the Middle East that is Israel. That's a political discussion. I've got some Jewish friends who don't agree with what their government or the government of Israel is doing. I've got a Jewish mate and a Palestinian mate who worked that one out. Um, as I say, some of my Jewish friends do not agree with what the government of Israel is doing, not only to its neighbours and whatever, but also to its own people with the judicial reforms, which make it easier to detain people without trial, for example. Yeah, it, but unfortunately, you have a centre left opposition, and then the governing parties are all right wing. And when we say right wing, we are talking on the level of Italian fascism, Spanish nationalism, right wing, which then gets spread out in the football fans. When you have a very, very populist, nationalistic government that transcends society, um, well, I think we're getting there slowly. I don't think things are as bad now as what they were 40 years ago. Although when I was a kid, I never really actually saw any kind of discrimination as such. It's only when I reached my mid teenage years that I started to actually notice a slight uptick. But then again, I've got mixed race cousins, I've got friends who are mixed race. Things that were acceptable in the 90s and the 2000s are not as acceptable now, like some of the humour and stuff. But when you actually ask the minority groups about, did you find that joke funny when I dressed as a Mexican? If you were to go to a Latino and I'm dressed as a Mexican with a poncho and a sombrero, they don't find it offensive. It's white middle class people find it offensive in America. It's really weird. So I'm offended on your behalf. But there are certain things that you get away with, certain comedy shows, and sports stars being interviewed. They would say certain phrases and things, you know, which was okay back then. But now, hang on a second. But no, unfortunately, like coming back to the sexism thing, especially with female presenters, they cop it. But I've been brought up with Gabby Logan and Sue Ryder and Claire Balding doing sports presenting for the best part of 25, 30 years. Not once have I really seen a lot of hate towards them because they were successful in the sports they actually participated in as well, which helped. But some of the new generation, like Laura Woods, well, I don't think she's the best presenter. I think she stumbles her words, makes a few mistakes. She's better than a lot of the male pundits that we see. Good news though, trans women have now been banned from women's competition. That's a debate. That's more political than sporting. I think that's more of a political, populist kind of political debate. It's a common sense thing, but unfortunately, some members of the left don't like it. But that's where sport and politics have unfortunately collided over a social issue. But the UK is not the only country having this debate and this sporting discussion. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see more political involvement. It's unfortunately common sense left the room years ago. Sports administration, common sense left the room years ago. It's one of the few times sport has made any common sense decisions, but it may not be like, I don't know, a popular decision with a proportion of society. It's a very loud, vocal minority. And I think a lot of people of the LGBTQ plus community, I think I've got all the letters there, because the LG, I was always thought it was LGBT. That's what I was brought up with. I've, I, it's only been in the last couple of years we're having this debate. I've never come across a transgender person who's actually interested in sport anyway. Now, maybe that is because of discrimination, but even with a lot of my gay friends, they're just sports fans. They don't care if like if they're watching men's football. They just don't care. My next door neighbour's gay. He doesn't. He goes, I don't care about sport. Does not interest me. He's more interested in video gaming, movies, and documentaries. He is a absolute legend when it comes to him. He knows the Star Wars, the Star Trek. He is your gamer nerd, and he has no interest, absolutely none. And he's now a good friend of mine. He has no interest in. He subscribes to the channel. He supports the channel. He's probably when he gets into work, will probably watch his live stream, but he has no interest in sport. He never has. It's never something that has appealed to him. And unless you actually get to properly know him, you wouldn't even realise he's gay. To be quite honest. Um, Now, whether the trans community has been put off sport for a long time because of discrimination is another thing. That's a study that obviously studies have been done, and you could do 1,000 LGBT LGBTQ plus people in a room, and maybe there will be some lesbians actually. They love their sport. There's going to be a lot of gay men, homosexual men, who haven't come out to their family or their friends necessarily, or some of them who are massive sports fans, but if they were to come out, that they fear the abuse they're going to receive. But this is where the Rainbow Laces campaign has failed. Like the Rainbow campaign, if you're a hockey player, you wrap your stick. If you're a rugby player or a football player, you have rainbow laces. It's clearly failed. It's been an active campaign to target homophobia as that is not acceptable, which it never has been. I'll be brutally honest. The ancient Greeks got it right. I'm not going to lie, they got it right with their, you know, gay, gay and lesbian rights. They really did. So did the Romans. Why have we gone backwards over the last 2,000 years? The ancient cultures really got it right with their, tolerance of everyone. Really, if you were captured in battle, you were a slave. Didn't matter your background. If you were in power and you were gay, didn't matter. Right? They treated everyone equally. In your system, right? We've gone backwards over the last 2,000 years. All that has to do with monotheistic religions. There you go. And mistranslations of ancient texts from about 2,000 years ago, because that's a thing. It's a thing. Look, we can debate about, you know, the mental health aspects of the pressures that, you know, some people with body dysmorphia and gender dysmorphia fit and go through. It's got to be horrible hating yourself basically for your entire life. And having that hormone imbalance in your body, and I'm not denying that is a struggle. I don't know what that struggle is like because obviously I'm not, but it's got to be a terrible thing to deal with. At the same time, where we're at right now, I think the common sense approach would be have separate categories for them. Let them compete in competitions and stuff in a transgender category. So men who transition to women and women who transition to men. That's got to be the logical outcome here. Surely. That's got to be the common sense outcome. But at the same time, I'm not saying they shouldn't be allowed to play sport and participate at all. But if you're genetically born a man, you're going to have more muscle density and a higher body mass. So if you're playing rugby, for example, you are going to potentially, or boxing or MMA. We've seen it in the UFC, in the mixed MMA. The female fighter was left with a fractured skull. They may have been in the same weight division, but it's that muscle mass and that core strength that's different. Now, women have a higher pain threshold, which is a fact. They also have a higher percentage of body fat. Muscle is denser than fat. So when you have that body density and that bone density, you're going to hurt them. Yeah. Women can tolerate more pain because of childbirth, obviously, but they don't have the bone density and the muscle density. So that power per square inch, that PSI, yes, that's the thing, power per square inch, pressure per square inch, but whatever, Newton meters, whatever. That's going to bloody hurt. We've seen it in, you know, weight. It's just swimming, cycling. It just devalues women's sport that they themselves have fought decades for to get recognition to where we are now. Yeah, no, yeah, I just don't know. This is where I think a minority of the LGBTQ plus community have actually hijacked their own cause and caused chaos. Because I don't believe anyone who was born a man goes, you know, that they've got a lot of them have a lot of common sense. They just obviously have this body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia, but they realise if they had to get into a boxing ring with a natural born female who's still a female, they are going to kill them. It's like when like a rugby player, an ice hockey player, or a boxer is on steroids, and you can tell that they're going to go into that collision a little bit harder, and they're going to injure the opposition player or opposition fighter. Like, you've got to have a really weak you've got to have no conscience, basically. Um, and it is a very small minority that are arguing that transgender athletes should compete. I do not see any women who transition to men wanting to compete against men. Let that sink in. I have not seen one single transgender athlete who was born a woman, who's now a man, wanting to compete against actual men because they realise they're going to get utterly, utterly destroyed. We're talking about the contact sports. We're talking about they're going to come last in every race in the track and field, by and large, right? It's only men who transition to women, and a small minority of them, by the way, that suddenly want to compete against them. But when you look at their results when they were men, they were crap. So that's income. It's the win at all costs mentality, but at the same time, given their own separate category. And I bet you now a lot of LGBTQ plus community won't watch it anyway. They much rather watch the team sports or the individual sports right now for men and women. I identify with that athlete or this country or this team. But this is the divisive debate. Like, do I think they deserve the abuse they get from the homophobia and the phobia? No. When people apply common sense, you're labelled a phobic. No, no, I just don't want to see a woman get battered by a genetic man because society doesn't like wife beaters, right? And to see an athlete who's had to overcome many obstacles anyway to get to where they are. We're now starting to see it with rugby union and rugby league and women's football, where 20 years ago you stopped at the age of 11. You weren't allowed to play past that age because you were deemed you were going to get battered by the teenage boys. Their muscle mass increases massively, and suddenly, you know. Now, whether that was a fair decision to stop, girls' sports, with mixed sports at the age of 11, and then not really have that continuation of youth teams to senior teams, that's open for debate, and a lot of the sport authorities should be criticised for some of the decisions they actually took back in the day. And we've made massive progress in women's sport. I think this hinders it. But we'll have to see if studies of actual surveys of the LGBT plus community, whether they would actually watch a transgender category or whether they actually feel comfortable with a genetic male in a boxing ring with a woman. I'm sorry, I am not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with basically a bloke with tits beating the shit out of a woman because he's got a physical advantage in that area. Even if they're in the same weight category, he's going to have twice the punching power. Unless that female boxer is dosed on roids to even it out, he's going to, as we saw with the MMA, leave him with severe head injuries. I wouldn't feel comfortable with a former male now transition to female rugby player playing legal union against a female opponent, it would just be carnage. And I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. The female athletes aren't comfortable with it. Even those who are members of the LGBT plus community, who are lesbian or bisexual, are like, we're not comfortable with this. It's back, and then they're able to get, just and again, it's a small minority saying, you must be a transphobe. No, I'm part of your community. I don't feel comfortable with a genetic male scrummaging in the front row against my team. I'm not comfortable, getting hit by a number 7 blindside flanker as a fly half because they're going to basically bugger me back, shatter me ribs, paralyse me. So that's my view on it. I think yes, it's a common sense decision. But then there's these rather shouty people who are white, middle class, and educated allegedly because they've been to university, of course. Because the working classes can't have an opinion on it. Fuck 'em. Who are offended on their behalf, saying, "Oh no, it's discriminatory." No, 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 no. It's called common sense. Unfortunately, common sense as a thing left the building 25 years ago. I mean, yeah, common sense is not in a lot of supply lately. Look at our current government. Look who we've got running the world right now. I mean, Vladimir Putin's gone all full blown 1930s dictator overlord. We're on our fourth prime minister in 4 years. Um, France likes to riot all the time. Germany's gone into recession because Angela Merkel made some great decisions back in 2015. Eastern Europe's on fire, pretty much. Turkey's about to basically re-elect a dictator for life. Yeah, they elected the orange one as president of the United States. Common sense isn't in large supply. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, crikey, the footballing authorities thought taking the knee would stop. We've stopped racism apparently. No, players going on strike and actually costing their sport tens of millions of pounds per day will eventually force action from the authorities. We now find out that several police forces are institutionally racist and sexist. So common sense isn't a thing that we actually have a lot of at all. It's not a thing. It was a thing. Yeah, we decided to stop using it. Or those in administration of power did, and we allowed the mob to make policy. It's just yeah, common sense isn't a thing. You know, and while I do have a lot of sympathy with those who are struggling with their orientation sexually or their gender or whatever their issue may be, or facing discrimination in society. Guess what? I faced it as a working class lad at public school. Different type of discrimination, but I was singled out for bullying and crap because I was from a working class background at that posh school. People fear what's different, but how many people from the LGBTQ community are actually going to feel comfortable with a transgender male to female transitioning athlete competing against women? When women athletes in that same community are saying, "Hold up, we hang on a second, this is not right." Because again, I've never seen a female athlete who has transitioned to being a male compete in men's sports because they know the same outcome is going to result. They're going to get hurt. They're going to get injured. They're going to come last place. It's not going to be worth their effort. And I do think it's set back women's sport by many, many years. That's my opinion. But as I say, common sense has been lacking. Look, a handful of angry middle class white people are going to be upset by this, Shane. But they're champagne socialists. Do as I say, not as I do. They're almost on the levels of being a professional protester at this point. Next week it'll be, well, you know, just stop oil or extinction rebellion. We're going to glue ourselves to electric trains. I mean, oh. It's like the funniest one is when the protesters glued themselves to a oil tanker truck that was carrying recycled cooking oil. Yeah, some of these protesters also don't have a brain cell between them either. They're just attention seekers who clearly have problems. But no, taking jokes aside and sarcasm out of it, yes, you know, they've decided to uphold the ban. Yes, there's been some legal challenges to it and court of arbitration for sport. This is going to be one of professional sports' biggest headaches for the next decade. Um, However, until you can eradicate the abuse from the stands on social media, it's never going to work anyway. There's a reason why we have more openly lesbian and bisexual female athletes than male athletes who are gay or bisexual. Yeah. So, and that there are a lot of fans who are the LGBTQ plus community of sport, who just want to watch sport without the politicization of it. Um, I think it's going to be a debating point for a long time, long, long time. And as I say, the debate won't go away. Um, we're probably going to see more challenges, legal challenges, and complaints. Um, I think the solution that will suit all parties is to have separate categories for men who transition to women and women who transition for men who, if they wish to participate in sport. And I bet you not many of them sign up because they're not going to get much funding or have many fans watching them because they are such a minority. You might get about what, 15, 20 athletes in the UK who might be transgender at the elite level. That's not really competitive anyway. That's my view on things. Um, but as I say, it's only really become an issue in the last couple of years. Yeah, I mean, is this the biggest issue facing sport? I don't think so. I think weak governance, corruption, and doping and gambling issues, I think, are far more important to deal with first. And then the discrimination individual players are facing or minority groups are facing. Yes, we need to stamp that out from the fans. We got to this topic by discussing what's happened to Vinicius Junior and some other black players in Spain. The players need to go on strike. It's a simple solution to the problem. Refuse to play until the sporting authorities and the police really start hammering these people. When the sport is bleeding money, they will suddenly go, "Oh God, we really do have to do something." Because at the moment, they're giving lip service. Um, but I don't want to, because this also brings in a political debate, and this is where sport and politics, the waters have been muddied, and it's a very toxic debate because you can't have a reasonable debate anymore because the champagne socialist middle class and the just the right wing wallies, best way I can describe them, get on their keyboards and go, "I'm offended," and then that's the left wing loonies, and then the right wing, repugnant right wing, get on their keyboards and then just keep dishing out the crap, and then the 99% or 95% in the middle, like you and me, just sit there going, "Can we just watch the football? Can we just watch the rugby? Can we just watch the ice hockey or whatever it may be? Whatever sport we want to watch and want to, participate in, and leave the politics and that crap at the door, please." And it is a minority who ruin it for the majority, and unfortunately, we have to cave into one minority, and then we have to kick out the other minority, and then the minority we've just caved into of fans, that left wing loony bit, want more and more and more and more, which is just like, well, you've already got laws. Let's just go away. We watch sport and participate in sport because it's a distraction from the shambles that is Monday to Friday, everyday life. When you when the leaning left and the repugnant right hijack sporting events, you piss off 95% of pretty decent people who will end up disliking your pressure group and disliking you more. Quite simple, really. Who knew? Um, when the silent majority finally have a voice, and then unfortunately, they don't speak up enough and say, shut up, fuck off. Take your politics out, take your racism and homophobia and sexism out, and go away if you don't want it. And unfortunately, this is what I see on social media, is the reasonable majority just have got exasperated by about 5 to 10% of people when it comes to sporting issues, at least. Um, it's just so the rise of social media and the relationship with sport. I think we need to. I need to do a video on that because there's a reason why I've got rid of my Twitter. There's a reason why I just post funny sports memes and political memes on Facebook. Same with my Instagram. I just post funny real videos to be made. And this is my only real outlet where I actually discuss stuff. The few channels that I follow, again, are pretty similar to mine with their balance, where they keep the politics up, and they just discuss the sport, or they just discuss the metal detecting hobby, or you know, um, that's it. I follow a couple of outdoor kind of adventure kind of channels like metal detecting and exploring, kind of urban exploring, and a couple of sports channels. That's it. And they are politically neutral. Is the best way I can describe it. And that's kind of refreshing. Unfortunately, social media is a mess, and sports relationship with social media is yeah, it's gone downhill pretty quick. Um, I first got interested in Twitter in about 2012, just in time for the 2012 Olympics, and I felt at that time the fact that sports teams and athletes were making themselves a bit more accessible to fans, I felt was a positive and was a good thing, like a little bit behind the scenes. We like when you put up, the behind the scenes director's cut for a film or the outtakes of a TV series. I thought it was a bit, refreshing that they were embracing this new uh, media format to, engage with fan base and especially younger fans. Things started to go a little bit wrong, I would say, around 2014, 2015. We were starting to see that messy descent. And as the decade wore on into this decade, it's become a sewer, absolute sewer. Um, if a player's got religious grounds for not doing something, they get hate. If a player's copy abuse and they stand up for it, they get hate. If a player makes a bad tackle, they get hate. If a player scores an own goal, look like Harry Maguire's had a couple of rough seasons. He got death threats. I mean, it started to become really, really like I think players, sports stars back in the 80s must have loved the hate mail because you would have a postage mark from where the idiot would post the hate mail from. So it gives you a general idea when you give it to the police. Say, look, this guy's threatening the team, myself, and my teammates. There's a postage stamp mark on it. And so the police can go, right, we can do a radius search of this area and we can look at high profile people who've sent threats in the past and this kind of thing. Now you can get a VPN and you could be in London abusing a guy who's playing for the LA Lakers, and your IP address could say Los Angeles. You can really be anonymous. And I really do have to look at sports' relationship with social media, because this goes back into the debate about Vinicius Junior and the abuse he's currently receiving. Latrell Mitchell in the NRL and some of the abuse he's received. Some of the sexist abuse some of the female football players have received over the last, I'm going to say, 5-6 years. And it's this, it's unfortunately, and then we've seen the pushback from sports leagues going, we're going to have a racism or a inclusion round or women in league, all these various specialist rounds, like match nights and rounds of games, because they see that as good PR. And then there's the Manly Sea Eagles jersey fiasco, the Pride jersey last year, which was going to be women in league round. They decided, no, we're going to have the LGBTQ plus community jersey, but it's women in league round, so your players play with pink socks or something, and charitable proceeds go towards a women's charity that deal with women's health or domestic, whatever it may be. And the Manly Sea Eagles cocked that up. The NRL cocked that up. 7 first-team regulars refused to play. Then some of the players they called up to cover them from the expanded 30-man squad and the reserve grade squad refused to play, and then they didn't win a single game after that. We've seen it in the NHL this season, some of their Pride nights, and then social media on top of that. It's just, again, it's the shouty, loony left and the repugnant, shouty, grumpy, far right, repugnant right. I think the 95% are sat here going, "Can we just enjoy the sport?" And so I've noticed this polarisation as time has gone on. It's got worse over the last 5-6 years. I think COVID has accelerated it, and the last 2.5-3 years is I've given up. I've honestly given up. I think there's going to come a point where a lot of athletes just delete their Twitter, delete their Instagram, get rid of their Facebook, and I think sports teams will be impacted, where they go, we're distancing ourselves from this social media platform or that social. Because there's more than just multiple social media platforms where you can share videos and share likes, and, statements, and sports leagues and teams may go, we're not getting protected from the abuse. Some of our players or officials have death threats, that kind of thing. We're going to cease to be a social media. This social media partner is no longer going to be our social media partner. We're going to walk away from it. And there are multiple high-profile athletes who got rid of their social media. They've just had enough, and I can't blame them. It's got to the point now where social media companies are now getting heavily fined and dragged over the hot coals because they're not appropriately moderating some of the content that's on there. And there's some pretty disturbing stuff on social media. And I just got bored with Twitter. I never really enjoyed Twitter. I always found it very. It was never a great. I don't know what people rave about it, but there we go. But that's my view on that. I do think we need to look at that relationship between sport and social media, because I don't believe it's a healthy relationship anymore. I think the early days was good for about the first few years. I think about 2015, 2016, that relationship was going more the other way, and now it's not worth the risk, I don't think. But again, that's my opinion on that one, and I think that covers the the transgender sports issue and Vinicius Junior as well. I think that all links in together. Very polarised debate, and this is where the politics side of it gets involved in it, and it's not good. We involve ourselves and invest in sport to get away from the mess that is everyday life. And Let's have a look at the sports news. But that's my view on things. I mean, and then we've seen investigations into sporting governing bodies failing athletes' welfare, failing to deal with complaints of harassment, bullying, and welfare concerns, and and then reviews and sackings. Oh dear! Oh, talking about here we go. Ivan Toney, Brentford boss Thomas Frank criticised strikers' 8-month ban for breaking betting rules. I won't be able to play his interview because of copyright. However, we were discussing Ivan Toney earlier. Brentford striker Ivan Toney's 8-month ban is a massive reminder that the relationship between, I'm going to say sport, but football in this case, and the gambling industry needs to be reviewed. Thomas Frank, his manager, says. He's been banned for 8 months for breaking FA betting rules. On Friday, it was revealed that Toney was given a reduced ban because of gambling addiction, which he's been diagnosed with. Football and gambling's relationship needs a review, and Premier League clubs have voted that in a couple of years' time they're going to ban betting sponsors from their shirts. We, football and gambling, as we got a massive reminder, the authorities have a massive task to make sure we do this much better. That's Thomas Frank, Brentford manager. Toney was charged with 262 betting offences at the end of last year. He admitted to 232. So there was 30 that he pleaded not guilty to. So that's interesting. He's prohibited from training until the 17th of September. He cannot play again until the 17th of January, which actually may benefit him for the Euros next year. Yes, I've did something wrong, but what I don't get is how you cannot let him be involved in football at all for the first 4 months. What do you gain from that? If you want to rehabilitate people, you need to give them education, you need to do something, and now he's left on his own, which I think is wrong. There is no doubt for me that the first 4 months he could be involved in football. He should be forced to go into 100 schools, tell them about football background. That's how it should work. But I'm a football coach. What do I know? So he's already criticising the FA and how they dealt with structuring Ivan Toney's suspension. His comments come after support from Gareth Southgate this week. On Wednesday, after naming his England squad for the 2020 qualifiers against Malta and North Macedonia, not really big games, Southgate said, "What bothers me is we've got to look after people. He's injured at the moment. What does he do about getting fit? How do we give him some structure over the next few months so that he can develop himself or be a better person in England? I don't like the idea we just leave somebody so they're not allowed to take part in the community. I don't think it's how we should work. I don't think that's how the best rehabilitation programs would work." Frank agreed with the England boss and added, "It was a fantastic point you made. If you want to rehabilitate people, you give them education. Do we do enough to educate our players?" That is interesting, that one. Uh, Now that we have everything in place, we'll put the plan together, do our best to support Ivan Toney. If I can't speak to him, I guess I'll have to ban me as well. If I'm not allowed to support him, there must be something wrong. I think you're allowed to contact people when they're in prison on you, so I think I'm allowed. In March, Brentford were reported to be considering cutting ties with Hollywood Bet, their sponsor, who'd been their sponsor since July 2021. A month later, Premier League clubs collectively agreed to withdraw gambling sponsorship from their matchday shirts by the end of the 2025-2026 season. However, after the deadline, clubs will still be able to continue featuring gambling brands in areas such as shirt sleeves and LED advertising. I think that you either completely ban it or don't ban it at all. Don't do things by half. And the clubs will be allowed to secure new shirt front deals before the deadline. 8 top flight clubs for this current season: Bournemouth, Brentford, Everton, Fulham, Leeds, Newcastle, Southampton, and West Ham have gambling companies on the front of their shirts, worth an estimated 60 million sponsors per year. So that interview by Thomas Frank has just been given. What else is going on? Verstappen is top in the F1 practice in Monaco. Carlos Sainz Jr. has had a massive prank, apparently. So yes, I started at the beginning of the last year discussing the relationship between sport and gambling companies. I think Ivan Toney's ban really does highlight the issue that we have. I think the way the FA have structured his ban is wrong. He's clearly got mental health issues because addiction is a mental health issue. That's you know uh, proven fact. The fact he's not allowed to be involved in any way, shape, or form for 4 months is worrying. And then you've got to think about the other health impacts of by not allowing to be involved in training and around his teammates and colleagues is concerning. Um, were the FA right to ban him? Obviously, he's breached the rules. Yes, you deserve a ban. But I think they could do better in the support and rehabilitation. Absolutely. But as I say, he's not been the first player banned for betting breaches. He will not be the last. Um, he's the latest in a long line of players who've fallen afoul of gambling addiction or breaching betting rules. And so, eyebrow, and in fact, he, the amount of charges he got is not even a quarter of what Joe Barton had. Joe Barton had over 1,800 betting breaches during his playing career. When he was playing in Scotland, he got caught, and they looked back at his betting history online and were like, "Oh my God, that's only 2,000 breaches of the betting regulations in two different countries, three different countries, because France as well." And he got 18 months. So Ivan Toney's got 10 months less for a significantly less amount of breaches than Joe Barton. Work that one out. This is a worrying thing, and all these high profile players that I've discussed before and on tonight's live stream is all in the last, I think, 6-7 years. They're all recent. This is not like something that's been going on for decades, although it probably has. And again, we're coming back to this is a political issue as well because the government have been trying to bring forward legislation to reduce gambling adverts on TV, especially during live sports broadcasts. They're trying to wean, that similar to the tobacco ban on sponsorship or the alcohol ban in France, for example. They're trying to get professional sport away from reliance on gambling revenue. But we were discussing earlier, looking at the US legalizing sports gambling in all 50 states. It's up to each individual state legislature to bring in that act, that law to say yes, we can now grant licenses. I think around 20 to 25 US states it's still not legal because the state senates basically haven't passed legislation. But technically, every state, if they wish to, can bring in legislation saying this is now legal and regulated. And now we're seeing North American sports teams getting very reliant on gambling revenues and sponsorship. And I think the US and Canada are going to see a lot of what we've seen with Ivan Toney happen with their professional players. It's going to become it's going to become an issue for the North Americans, which the Europeans have been dealing with for decades. And again, we can discuss the pros and cons of that at some point. And I think it's making a lot of North American fans uncomfortable. Now, there is a high profile sports personality who has a YouTube channel and a podcast who has a commercial arrangement with a betting firm. And yes, I do occasionally watch some of his content. I don't agree with everything that comes, they discuss. And it is troubling. There are several high-profile sports athletes who have got personal sponsors who are betting firms, and there are some high-profile sports personalities who may have retired, who may be involved in commentary or in presenting, who again have got ties to gambling firms. And this is a massive, massive concern. And it's not going away. And I don't know where we go, but we've been here before with the tobacco industry and alcohol in France. And we won't see any tobacco products sponsoring sports teams anymore. That's been a thing for over 2 decades. Alcohol, less teams have alcohol sponsorship now than what they did 20 years ago. There's more money in sports gambling companies. They're worth more money. They generate more revenue, and it's a fact. Um, but the Ivan Toney situation, we've gone full circle in this life. The Ivan Toney situation does highlight a lot of problems that professional sport has, not just in this country, but you know, it does highlight issues. Um, the fact that 9 Premier League clubs this season have gambling sponsors is a concern. The fact that the sponsorship ban only covers the front of the jersey after 2026, but you can still have it on the shirt sleeves or on the shorts is a concern. The fact it only applies to the Premier League is a concern. The fact that the Scottish League system have ruled out and that's for individual clubs to sort out is a concern. This is becoming a political issue. And again, sport and politics are mixing, which is happening more and more. So yeah, I don't know how we can go about things. I don't know how we can solve problems. We're going to have some really tough discussions going forward because the way the FA have structured Ivan Toney's ban, I don't agree with. I agree he should be banned from playing, but I think there should be more support given to Ivan Toney. Again, social media. Some of the things said on social media are just disgraceful. There also isn't full transparency in what those charges were. The fact he pled not guilty to 30 of them in total is interesting. The fact he pled guilty to most of them is pretty telling. But we don't know the full. What games did he bet on? Did he bet on himself? Did he bet on other leagues? Was he permanent? They've not been overly clear in his betting breaches, apart from he had 262 of them. So that then raises questions of, well, he's not the only player doing this, and are players gambling to fix matches? And so it raises questions over the integrity of the sport, and that is a whole different kettle of fish. I mean, I could look at some match fixing scandals in some of those history videos that I do because they're going to be really interesting to look at. Obviously, famously, we had the 2006 Italian Calciopoli scandal, and we had the 1980 Italian match fixing bribery scandal as well. Famously, Paolo Rossi got banned for football, got a suspended sentence, and then was allowed to play at the '82 World Cup, where he wins the Golden Boot and wins the World Cup for Italy. So we have seen, gambling and match fixing in professional sport before. We've seen the Black Sox scandal in Major League Baseball in 1919, famously, which ultimately has left a legacy of a stain upon baseball in North America. And I think baseball has been a league beset by scandal for over a century. We saw Operation Slapshot in regards to the NHL and a betting ring and high-profile players and coaches involved in that. There's been rumours circulating about the NBA and the NFL for some time. We saw the Michael Donaghy, the referee, obviously with the betting scandal in 2008 in the NBA. And this is before the legalisation of US gambling laws and the liberalisation for outside of Vegas and Atlantic City, for example, outside the casinos. So this is quite, and now that you have this legalisation and this, sort of social acceptance of gambling as seen as socially acceptable. We'll have to see the impacts on professional sport. We've seen it in Europe for decades. It's going to be interesting if we have a match fixing scandal involving a spot fix or a match fix in the US, and that will completely change how we view things. Um, because look what's going on with snooker. Look what's happening with cricket. Um, beset by match fixing scandals and allegations and individuals getting caught and players and court cases. Um, I think North America is going to be given a rude awakening in the next couple of years. Um, very rude awakening. I don't think sport in North America is prepared for the consequences of a match fixing scandal or a betting scandal. Um, I just don't think they're fully equipped mentally to deal with it, let alone the actual leagues themselves equipped to deal with the fallout of a gambling scandal involving professional sport. I do not think they're ready for it. Back in the day, it was organised crime, betting, illegal, unlicensed gambling. Right now, I don't think professional sport in the US, and I don't think the leagues are properly prepared for it. I don't think they realise that. I think it's going on with players breaching betting rules on a quite regular basis. They don't even realise because they're more interested in the drug and alcohol policies and catching players with the drug and alcohol tests for prohibited substances. Or um, and I just don't think they're fully prepared. But we shall see what happens. It would also be interesting if anyone's got any other questions, because honestly, this the weather's nice, by the way. I'm going to be sat in the garden in a bit, enjoying the last of the evening sunshine. But it'd be interesting to see if there's any more questions, because I've rambled a lot for the last 30 minutes about sports governance and politics and the mess that is social media. Um, look, not everyone has to agree with my opinion. I think that's the joy of having a thing called debate. But I've never been a fan of the sports betting companies having such a massive influence on league finances and team finances and sport finances. And again, that's been in the last 10 to 15 years. We've seen a rise in gambling sponsorship in football, rugby union, rugby league, motorsport. Yes, motorsport's now got it now as well. Um, and individual athletes being, brand ambassadors, and that's their third party sponsorship. It's been a thing. It's been a trend for a long time, a troubling trend in my opinion. Um, and I don't know where we go from here in that regard. But I think other sports are going to have to look at to see how the Premier League is going to go forward, and potentially we could see change. We could see change. Hopefully, we see change. But there we go. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for watching. I will have some more content for you guys very, very soon.